For 2 years, everyone watching Richard Goodall's story figured they knew how it would end. A janitor becomes a viral sensation, wins a talent show, and eventually walks away from the mop bucket for good. It felt obvious. It felt inevitable. And yet, month after month, Goodall kept clocking in at West Vigo Middle School anyway, and fans kept asking the same question: when is he finally going to admit that this can't last forever? In the summer of 2026, he did. Here's the full story of how a school custodian from Terre Haute, Indiana, became one of the most talked about names in reality television, and why it took him so long to say what everybody already suspected. Richard Goodall's story doesn't start on a stage. It starts in hallways, cafeterias, and classrooms. For 23 years, Goodall worked as a custodian for the Vigo County School Corporation in Indiana, spending his most recent years at West Vigo Middle School. He wasn't chasing fame. He was mopping floors, wiping down lunch tables, and greeting kids every morning before the first bell rang. Music, though, had always been part of him. Long before any camera found him, Goodall sang in church choirs, took the mic at karaoke nights, and performed with gospel trios around Terre Haute. According to his official biography, he'd been singing informally since the 1990s, moving through local karaoke circuits and radio station contests without ever expecting it to lead anywhere bigger. It was simply something he loved, a way of showing up fully in ordinary rooms. That habit of singing while he worked is what changed everything. In 2022, a student filmed Goodall performing Journey's "Don't Stop Believin'" in the school hallway and posted it online. Neither Goodall nor the school had any idea it would spread the way it did. Fox News and ABC News both picked up the clip that summer, and within days a janitor from a small Indiana town had gone from unknown to internet famous. What most viewers didn't realize is that Goodall had already tried, and failed, to break into music on a national stage. He'd previously auditioned for The Voice and didn't advance. It's a detail that rarely makes the highlight reels, but it matters. By the time cameras found him again, Goodall wasn't a lucky amateur stumbling into stardom. He was a man who had already faced rejection and quietly kept singing anyway. 2 years after that hallway video went viral, producers from America's Got Talent reached out. Goodall auditioned for season 19, and his performance aired in May 2024. He sang "Don't Stop Believin'," the same song that had made him famous in the first place, and the judges' reaction was immediate. Judge Heidi Klum pressed her golden buzzer, sending Goodall directly to the live shows without another audition round. Simon Cowell was equally moved, later calling Goodall his hero on air. From there, Goodall built a run that felt less like a competition and more like a man working through a life's worth of feeling. He performed "How Am I Supposed to Live Without You" during the quarterfinals. In the semifinals, he took on Survivor's "Eye of the Tiger," a song he later said he landed on almost by accident, catching a Rocky movie marathon on hotel television and pitching the idea to his then-girlfriend, Angie, over the phone. For the finale, he sang Journey's "Faithfully," a song that carried personal weight, as he explained to Terre Haute's WTWO-TV that he wanted his journey to bookend itself, starting and ending with the same band. When the season wrapped in September 2024, Goodall was named the winner of America's Got Talent Season 19, becoming the first singer to take the title in 5 years. He was 55 years old, a fact the show and its fans embraced as part of what made his story land so hard. This wasn't a prodigy. This was a man who had put in decades of quiet, unglamorous work before anyone outside Terre Haute ever heard his voice. What television audiences didn't see in the moment was how much loss sat underneath that performance. Goodall's first wife, Patricia "Patty" Goodall, died in June 2021 after battling cancer. According to her obituary and Goodall's own interviews, the two had been together for around 3 decades, and losing her left him, in his words to the Indianapolis Star, trying to figure out who he was without her. He later described the period as one of the hardest of his life, admitting that acting as both a professional caretaker at work and a personal caregiver at home nearly broke him. Singing became part of how he came back from that. A few months after Patty's death, a fellow custodian posted on Facebook about a bar hosting karaoke night, and Goodall decided to go. That small decision ended up reshaping his life twice over. Not only did it reconnect him with the music that had always steadied him, it's also how he eventually met the woman who would become his second wife. Angie Van Oven followed the bar's Facebook page, where Goodall's karaoke performances were regularly posted, and the two connected on New Year's Day 2022. Their relationship grew alongside Goodall's music, and by the time America's Got Talent came calling, Angie was one of the people pushing him hardest to go for it. The two married in Pasadena, California, on September 18, 2024, just days before the season finale aired, and about a week before Goodall was declared the winner. He announced it himself on Facebook, writing that he and Angie were now Richard and Angela Van Goodall. Photos from the day show a beach dinner in Malibu with members of his AGT circle in attendance, a private, personal celebration rather than a manufactured television moment. Angie's influence on Goodall's life went beyond convincing him to audition. She also encouraged him to look into a question he had carried for most of his life, the identity of his biological father. In August 2025, Goodall shared on social media that, with Angie's encouragement and the help of an ancestry DNA service, he had located and met his father for the first time. He introduced the man to fans simply as Hubert, a retired K-9 police officer from the Indianapolis area and a retired Army veteran. By Goodall's account, Hubert had never known Goodall existed. He had no other children, which made the discovery, in Goodall's words, something close to unbelievable for a man in his position after all those years. Goodall thanked Angie directly in his announcement, saying that without her encouragement he likely never would have gone looking in the first place. It's a detail that fits a pattern running through this entire story. Nearly every major turn in Goodall's life over the past few years traces back, in some way, to the people who believed in him before the world did. Here's where the what we all suspected part of this story really begins. After winning a national television competition and a $1 million prize, most people assumed Goodall would immediately leave his janitor job behind. He didn't. Goodall went right back to work at West Vigo Middle School, and he stayed there for nearly 2 more years. He was upfront about why in interviews with NBC Insider throughout 2025. Asked whether he'd left the school, he told them plainly that he was still there, even as concerts are popping up, and amazing things were happening behind the scenes of his music career. He said he intended to keep working at the school until he simply couldn't anymore. He posted photos of himself cleaning the cafeteria as late as July 2025, captioning one shot with a cheerful note about giving the room some love. When asked why the students weren't treating him differently after his win, he pointed out something simple and true: they saw him every single day. Fame on television doesn't erase the fact that you're still the guy who greets kids in the hallway each morning. This is the piece of the story that fans kept circling back to. It seemed obvious to nearly everyone watching that the janitor job and the music career couldn't coexist forever. Goodall had a golden buzzer, a #1 moment on national television, and a growing performance calendar. Surely retirement was coming. But Goodall wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. He kept describing his situation in the present tense, careful not to promise an ending he wasn't sure was ready to arrive. While he kept his day job, Goodall was quietly laying the groundwork for a real career. Rather than rushing into a record deal, he worked with a new management team and weighed opportunities carefully instead of accepting everything offered to him. In June 2025, he traveled to Nashville to begin work on original material, and on August 29, 2025, he released his debut single, Long Time Coming. He also joined a local group called Sugar Street, performing smaller regional shows that let him grow as an artist without the pressure of a national audience watching his every move. In August 2025, Goodall returned to the America's Got Talent stage for the show's 20th anniversary special, opening the night with Eye of the Tiger, and later performing Long Time Coming alongside Journey guitarist Neil Schon during the season 20 finale, a full-circle moment tying his new music directly back to the song that started his entire journey. Through all of it, Goodall stayed visibly connected to Terre Haute. He performed the national anthem at an Indiana Pacers game, took part in local holiday events, and continued posting everyday glimpses of his life alongside the bigger milestones. He wasn't performing humility for an audience. He was simply continuing to be who he'd always been, a guy from a small Indiana city who happened to also be doing some extraordinary things on the side. By the spring of 2026, the balancing act reached its natural limit. In May 2026, Goodall announced his retirement from his janitor position at West Vigo Middle School, effective at the end of the school year. It was the confirmation fans had been anticipating since the moment he won the show nearly 2 years earlier, the thing we all suspected, finally spoken plainly and on the record. Goodall didn't frame the decision as an easy one. He described it as emotional, telling reporters that ending the school year simply made more sense than continuing to split his time. Colleagues and reporters who covered his final days on the job described a bittersweet send-off, one built on more than 2 decades of relationships with students, teachers, and staff who had watched his entire transformation unfold in real time, often from the same hallways he was still cleaning. Part of what made the timing land the way it did was Goodall's own honesty about the risk involved. He's spoken candidly about the fact that entertainment doesn't come with the same stability as a steady paycheck and a pension. Walking away from a job he'd held for 23 years, one that had given him structure through some of the hardest years of his life, wasn't a decision he made lightly, even with a hit reality show and a record deal behind him. The retirement announcement arrived alongside another major development. Around the same time, Goodall signed a deal with Everard Entertainment, the production company behind films including Yes Day, to bring his life story to the screen. According to Goodall's own account, producer Ben Everard first reached out to him through a connection with AGT judge Howie Mandel not long after his season 19 win. From there, the two sides worked with a screenwriter to develop a script, which has since been shopped to agents, directors, and potential cast members. Goodall has said he's largely letting the production team lead the creative process, describing himself as along for the ride, rather than someone trying to control how his own story gets told. He's also been candid that the project has taken time. Nearly 2 years passed between his AGT win and the public confirmation of the film deal, a gap he's attributed simply to how long it takes a script and a pitch to come together in Hollywood. For Goodall, the moment carries a certain surreal quality that hasn't fully worn off. Being cast on national television already felt improbable to him. Having someone reach out afterward and say his life was interesting enough to turn into a movie, in his own description, still leaves him a little stunned. He said the whole thing is flattering, but he's also stayed grounded about what it means, treating it as one more chapter in a story he never expected to be telling in the first place. None of this happened in a vacuum, and Terre Haute's fingerprints are all over Goodall's story from the very beginning. Before he'd won anything, before there was any prize money to speak of, his own community stepped in to make his shot at America's Got Talent possible in the first place. When the show first flew him out to Los Angeles to audition, it wasn't a network or a sponsor covering travel costs. Neighbors, co-workers, and strangers who'd seen his viral cafeteria video organized a local GoFundMe to help get him there, and later helped cover travel for Angie so she could join him for subsequent tapings once their relationship deepened. That same hometown showed up again once he'd won. Local coverage from outlets around Terre Haute described emotional gatherings at his school celebrating his win, along with recognition from the city itself. Through it all, Goodall kept returning the favor by staying visible and accessible rather than disappearing into a bigger media market. He performed at local venues, showed up for Terre Haute institutions like the Vigo County History Center, and continued treating his hometown as home base rather than a place he'd outgrown. This mutual loyalty helps explain something that puzzled a lot of casual fans. Why a man with a golden buzzer and a #1 moment on national television would keep showing up in a school hallway with a mop for 2 more years. It wasn't indecision. It was Goodall trying to honor the place and the people who had shown up for him first, long before a television audience ever knew his name. Winning America's Got Talent comes with a reported $1 million prize, and speculation about what Goodall would do with it followed him for months. In interviews, he's talked about wanting to buy a proper home, something more livable than what he had, and has floated the idea of eventually getting an RV to travel with Angie. Angie herself has spoken publicly about wanting a place with her own washer and dryer after years of splitting time between a small apartment and a house she described as not quite livable. None of that reads like the spending pattern of someone chasing a flashy new lifestyle. It reads like 2 people who spent a long time without much, being deliberate about what financial security actually looks like once it finally arrives. That same deliberateness shows up in how Goodall approached his music career. Rather than signing the first record deal offered to him, he built a management team slowly, chose his singles carefully, and picked smaller local shows with a group called Sugar Street to develop as an artist before leaning fully into a national spotlight. It's a pattern that shows up again and again in his story, opportunity arriving fast, and Goodall choosing to move through it slowly and on his own terms anyway. Strip away the reality show packaging, and what's left is a fairly simple account of a man who didn't get a shortcut. Richard Goodall spent more than 2 decades doing steady, unglamorous work while singing largely for himself. He faced rejection from The Voice long before anyone knew his name. He lost a wife he'd spent 30 years with and had to rebuild a sense of identity from nothing. He found love again in an unlikely place, a bar's karaoke Facebook page, and let that relationship push him toward risks he might not have taken alone. He met a father who never knew he existed. And even after winning one of television's biggest talent competitions, he kept showing up to a school custodial job for nearly 2 more years before finally deciding the timing was right to let it go. None of that reads like a lucky break. It reads like the slow accumulation of an ordinary life that happened to intersect, at exactly the right moment, with a phone camera in a middle school cafeteria. What everyone suspected was that eventually the mop would have to come out of his hands for good. What took longer to understand is why he held on to that job as long as he did, and the answer turns out to be less about hesitation and more about loyalty to a community, a routine, and a version of himself he never wanted to lose sight of, even as the rest of his life kept expanding around it. Sources referenced include Wikipedia, NBC Insider, IndyStar, WTHR, Deadline, and reporting from TV Insider, Yahoo Entertainment, and Cadillac News, among other verified outlets covering Richard Goodall's public statements and career.